Joe Biden just gave his State of the Union address, and during that address, he said this.
An innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal.
But what he actually meant was this.
You use the word illegal when talking about the man who allegedly killed Laken Riley.
An undocumented person.
Now, if you're like me, you might be a little bit confused as to what he really meant and why he had such a Freudian slip at the moment of addressing the entire nation. And aside from that, we'll be looking at some of the gaffes at the State of the Union, because those were, at least fun to look at, and talk about the overall dynamics of the immigration bill that is trying to make its way through Congress right now, with the endorsement of Joe Biden behind it. But first, if you like this video, please hit the like down below, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and ring the notification bell to get notified whenever we make a new video. If you want to leave a comment, that really helps us as well. Thanks. So again, the State of the Union just came and passed. Joe Biden had some noteworthy moments while giving the address. The entire time he was giving the address, you could see Mike Johnson behind him smirking, and Kamala on the other side looking extremely proud and satisfied. All of that aside, there are some serious components of the State of the Union that I'm going to go into depth here and talk about. But first, the big one, the newsworthy bit of his address, is his slip of the tongue. So I already showed the clip of that. Why did that come out the way it did? Part of my argument here is going to rely on Joe Biden kind of being an old-fashioned Democrat from an older era of our politics. And you see the way he acts reflects this older Democratic proclivity. A lot of his policies are outdated. In particular, how he deals with Israel is extremely outdated. He's honestly kind of being pulled to the left on the issue of Israel and Palestine by the rest of the party and by the base, by the uncommitted votes. And yeah, he has other issues that he similarly is backwards on. He's not a 2024 politician living in the present day. He's a Clinton-era Democrat living in the present day. He has some very backwards policy positions. It is therefore not very surprising that when giving his State of the Union and including the current Democratic issue of the day, immigration, he used the word illegals. It's just probably bouncing around in his head all of the time. Him walking that back is just a matter of procedure. What the policy he is pushing for does is it ultimately, limits how many people can come in and places these hard limiters on capacity at individual points of entry into the United States. It is ultimately regressive. It's backwards. It's not moving forward. Doesn't address the humane issues on the table when it comes to immigration. It is, again, just a way of accepting a lot of the assumptions of conservatives about immigration and then addressing the problem with those assumptions baked into it. And that's disappointing to see. Yeah, he walks it back and says undocumented migrants or whatever when on MSNBC, but it does not change how he is sponsoring legislation and endorsing legislation, how he's using his bully pulpit to talk to the rest of the country. He's still the same kind of conservative Democrat. 20 years ago, he wouldn't have walked that back. He wouldn't have, had people telling him that was an insensitive way to address the issue. He would have just said illegals and not really minded. Nobody would have really cared. And that's the era that he fit right into. On the topic of immigration, it really has never been the Democratic Party's flagship electoral product, like an anti-immigration or immigration reform candidate. That's never really been what the Democratic Party have presented as. But that issue has been hammered home left, right, and center by conservative and liberal media for, years now at this point. Obviously, immigration is problematic. There is a crisis, but it's not exactly what it's been spun as in the media. The real problem with immigration is not a matter of too many people coming in over the border through illegal channels. A lot of that has been is a problem that has been created by reducing the amount of visas or making it harder to get in through legal ports of entry. The legal channels for migration into the United States have tightened. And that tightening has caused overflow in the less than legal channels of crossing the border and seeking asylum. In broad strokes, the Democrats have never really ran on this issue. It has been center focus for the Republicans for months now. You're starting to see Biden capitulate because he sees it as an electoral win, sort of selling downriver, people who are trying to migrate to the states to win the favor of voters. It is an annoying situation where you see Democrats sort of capitulating to the right-wing narrative on immigration, ceding a lot of different points to them, all to get upper hand in an election year. Again, that's the only reason he's doing this. For years now, the way that we handle immigration in the States has been problematic, going back not just to Donald Trump, but also to President Obama. During his administration, there was the whole crisis of keeping kids in cages, separating families at the border. There are many inhumane aspects in our immigration system that have been around, basically not just this administration or the previous, but for like decades. All to deal with influxes of people in a way that is, again, not very humane. So it doesn't really matter who's in office. We don't really address this issue in a way that is good faith. We don't really address it in a way that seeks to solve the problem being, helping people humanely enter the United States, creating legal avenues to alleviate the burden on illegal avenues. But nevertheless, Joe Biden is not progressive on the issue of immigration. That's why it's easy for him to capitulate to conservatives on this issue, take it out of their hands essentially and make it a Democrat flagship issue. And it's disappointing, but it's not all that surprising because he's kind of shown himself to be this backwards conservative Democrat time and time again. So those are kind of the some of the serious points. Again, this is not the Democrat stance, in my opinion, on immigration. It should be a much more humane approach should be taken to immigration. Really, we should be making it more accessible to seek legal means of entering the states. Yes, in the immigration bill, there is a move to essentially fast track the asylum system, get people through the courts faster, which is great. It usually takes somebody about like 2 years or so to get an asylum hearing, which then has like a 50-50 shot at letting them into the states. Now that with the bill, I think it would be much faster, be like in the span of months or so, but that's still not really fixing the problem, giving people a way of legally entering and getting work visas and the rest. It's an election year, so we'll see if Republicans actually, concede this to Joe Biden. They're being obstructive, which is, that's their main strategy. When the Democrats try to do something, they're being obstructive. And I guess for good reason, because immigration is an issue that is now quite popular, or rather quite talked about in America. A lot of Americans are conservative when it comes to immigration, mainly just because it is talked about everywhere in the same terms, always presenting immigration as a bunch of people coming into a zero-sum game in which we are playing, taking our stuff, taking all this other stuff, taking jobs, getting free resources, all of this. Yeah, there is some support for people who come here as migrants, but I think a lot of that is overblown. Really, migration, helps a greedy few people in capitalist society get essentially undocumented cheap labor. There's basically a second economy underneath the economy that we occupy that has work for these undocumented people that is typically going to be, unsafe, underpaid, all that stuff, because you can kind of get away with that when you are using an undocumented labor force. They don't really have anybody sticking up for them, and so they can be extra exploited. That's who benefits from them coming into the states. Nevertheless, it's been spun as a cultural issue by conservatives with, an economic fantasy attached to it. Is that fantasy anything approximating reality? No, not really. Like, people coming over the border and seeking asylum are not going to be getting your accounting job. They're not going to be stealing away your plumbing business. They're not going to turn into STEM workers overnight or welders overnight. They need schooling for all that. The better American jobs that all require schooling or experience or what have you, they need some kind of training or education that these people coming over don't have. They don't have the resources to get it. And when they come not speaking English, they're at a huge disadvantage. Okay, enough about that. Here are some of the gaffes that we had during the State of the Union that I thought were ridiculous. President Grandpa just fumbling over his words as usual.
He feels political win. He viewed it as a will be a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him. It's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. People pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth it taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 weeks, I would respectfully suggest my Republican friends owe it to the American people, get this bill done. We need to act now.
And that about wraps it up. Obviously, Joe Biden cannot speak, and that is a tragedy. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like down below, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and ring the bell to get notifications on when we release a video. If something interested you, please leave a comment down below as well. Have a great day. See you in a week.